Hello, I'm Blake Scarlevi with Route 16, and I'm here with another quick pro tip video for you. This one also has to do with Power Automate. We're going to talk about an action that I don't believe is used very much, at least as far as I've seen, and that action is called Scope. So now the idea of Scope is that you can take a bunch of different actions and kind of encapsulate it in one block. And what this is useful for is to be able to track the success or failure of a whole bunch of different actions versus just doing based off of like one each individual action. But it also has some more advantages to using scope as well that we'll talk through. So now, if you're familiar with Power Automate, you know there's a way to run an action based on the status of a previous action. So by default, when we add these actions, they're just going to run in order if the previous one is successful. So what you can do if when you go to an action, you can say configure run after, and so by default it's if this action is successful, but I can change it to if this action has failed. And then it'll put like this red arrow here. So this action will only get called if the previous action failed. So for example, here, maybe I have a table within the Dataverse to track errors. So I can say, if this action failed, now I'm going to create a row in this error table, right? So that's very helpful. The downside is you have to do that for each action, right? So now let's say I want to know if this action failed. So here I got to go configure run after, same thing. So when this one fails, now I want to go, create another log entry, for example. So you kind of just have to keep doing it after each individual action that you care about, right? So let's see. Switch these back, and then we'll look at the scope. So we can come here, add another action. We'll search for scope, and it's this orange guy here. And now we can, either add actions in here, or we can also drag other actions inside of it that we have. So now let's say we put a couple actions in here, right? So now instead we can come in here and we can say configure run after and has failed. So now it's going to be if anything in this scope block here has failed, then it's going to come here, and now we can create a log, and it'll, we'll create a log for everything within the scope versus having to do each individual action, which is less tedious. Although you still might want to track it for individual actions depending on how granular you want to get with your error logging. But if there's a lot of things you want to do, a lot of actions that you have and you don't really care about each individual step, you can leverage the scope, and it makes things a bit easier. So that's the main reason why the scope exists. But just a couple other helpful capabilities of it is you can see like it just helps clear or organize things. If you have a really crazy large flow, the scope can help organize it, right? So as you can see, I can click this to collapse it, and now it just makes things nicer. And you can also name it, so I can just group related or similar pieces of functionality and name it what that functionality pertains to, and it just helps organize it versus having this really large flow that just keeps scrolling and scrolling. And so that's one helpful way. The other, which is nice, and I don't think that it was really meant for this, but I find it helpful sometimes, is say I'm doing some things that I need to repeat, reuse, or maybe I want to use most of it, but just like tweak it a little bit. I can come to the scope itself and I can copy this whole scope. So then I can come down here, add an action, go to my clipboard, and I can paste the scope. So now it just copies every single action within there. So you can see how that's helpful, because it was a pain before Microsoft introduced the copy functionality. It was a pain to have to recreate each individual action. But even with the copy functionality, it can still be a pain if I want to do several actions and reuse it. Maybe I'm reusing it in a different flow, because you can copy things across different flows as well. Or maybe I just want to do something similar within the same flow and I just want to copy a bunch of things. So this comes in very handy. Again, pretty sure it wasn't meant for that, but that's one helpful tip that I've used quite a bit. So there you have it. You can start using the scope more often. Definitely comes in handy. Thanks for watching.